Hello and welcome to the Emerging Purpose Podcast. My name's Greg Donaldson, and each episode we talk to a new guest about the theme of purpose. This week I'm talking to a good friend of mine, Mr. Christopher Paul. So hello, welcome to the Emerging Purpose Podcast. I'm sat here with Chris Paul, who is a good friend of mine. We've known each other for maybe 5-6 years now. We started training at the Psychosynthesis Trust in 2013, I believe.
I think so, something like that.
Yeah, so welcome, Chris. How are you?
Oh, I'm good.
Excellent.
Yes, the usual sort of thing about being a bit tired and all the stuff you have at weekends when you're unravelling all the stuff from the week.
Yeah. So here we are. Yes, you're right. We're here on a Saturday afternoon in Brighton. Mm-hmm. The sun is shining. And we seem to be self-isolating because of all the stuff that's going on outside at the moment.
We're 2 meters apart, so that's good.
And we've washed our hands thoroughly.
Yep.
Yeah, so just for the benefit of our listeners, I wondered if you could tell me about what you do. I mean, I know what you do, but it'd be nice to hear your version of it.
Well, I'm a psychotherapist.
Easy for you to say.
I'm a therapist. I have a private practice. I work as a full-time private practice in rural Wiltshire. And that's what I do for money. And the rest of the time I live in a cottage on a farm, which is also where I work, in some premises next to the house. Go for walks, do a bit of gardening. See my friends, hang out.
Sounds pretty idyllic.
Well, it's idyllic until the storms start and they blow across the fields and knock bits of my greenhouse down. But it's hardly a big problem.
No, sure. So and living out in the country and doing your work, how is that for you? Do you that what kind of works for you? You find that there's enough clients and
yes, there's no problem with demand, and it's got the added bonus. I don't work in a town. I'm sort of halfway between Hungerford and Marlborough.
Yeah,
and so everybody has to drive, at least in some way, or somehow get to me, get a lift. And a lot of clients have found that drive is part of getting into the therapeutic space as well. Always therapeutic, because some of them will sort of stop just sort of down the lane in a parking spot and listen to the birds, look at the sun, look at the fields while they're waiting for the right time to come.
So the moment of calm and reflection before they're sort of processing,
and then there's a bit of decompression afterwards as they drive back. It might not be a long drive, but got people who drive half an hour. That's quite common.
Yeah, so it sounds like a nice place to work.
Well, it is. It's very quiet. You can listen to either the storms outside or the rain, or on nicer days, the sun. At the minute, a couple of angry geese, some bird song and stuff like that, and that's for a few clients. That's part of the session.
Yeah,
is that sort of the peace and quiet. As one client we've actually during the session been for a walk. Actually, just gone for a walk.
Really? So sort of moving more into the wild therapy sort of perspective.
That's right. Gone on a walk, seen the deer and some hares and pheasants, and
Yeah.
And that's been the part of being with.
So I guess maybe we should back up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You said you're a psychosynthesis psychotherapist.
Yeah.
So let's just explore that a little bit before we get into what that is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm quite interested to find out what led you into that. What led you into becoming a therapist?
Well, I was stood on the tube about 12, 13, 14, 15 years ago. And I could probably work out when it was exactly, because at that point it was very shortly after they put the retirement age up from 65 to 67, and I thought to myself, do I want to do what I'm doing now for the next 21 years? So it must therefore have been 9 years ago. 9 years.
And what were you doing at that point?
Well, I was working in the charitable sector, doing sort of management consultancy in sort of homelessness and housing.
Oh, right. So quite frontline work.
Well, it wasn't terribly, you see. That's part of it.
Okay.
Did plenty of frontline work, but this is more sort of a mixture of... So sometimes it was about inspections and sort of quality. Sometimes it was about coaching. I was doing a fair bit of coaching at that point. Sometimes it was about more sort of strategic work with organisations, or there was also quite a bit of just sort of writing stuff. Doing an assessment.
Admin.
Not exactly admin, no. It's more to do with, the whole social housing, it was mired in reports, applications for funding, etc., etc. So I used to do quite a lot of going and finding out about a project and helping them do their report to get their funding from the local authority or apply for other... So there's that sort of stuff as well. And that was all right. I didn't mind doing that. But this was sort of, just standing on the tube thinking, I don't particularly want to do this for that. It's all right, but it doesn't.
You'd been doing that for a while, had you?
Yeah, I had been doing that for a while. Up to that point, I'd always worked in social housing. And I realised, just sort of standing there, I thought to myself, what do I actually enjoy? And I think part of the work I enjoyed the most was the coaching work, and helping people develop, doing sort of staff development type things. And I quite enjoyed training as well at that point, but...
like offering trainings?
I did training courses in sort of, anything from sort of listening skills to... data protection I did a course on. Wow.
Scintillating.
Yeah. But it was mainly to do with working with homeless people.
Right.
In various aspects. And, and I realised that what I enjoyed the most was helping people develop. And actually more the sort of one-to-one work. So... And I enjoyed doing the coaching, and it wasn't just sort of one-to-one coaching that I did. It was also sort of group dynamics and group coaching and things like that. Nice. At that point. Yeah. So I can't quite remember how I reached the decision, but I think I decided that it made sense to do more of that. And as within the coaching, I enjoyed the emotional end much more than you should do this and try this technique and all this sort of stuff. Counselling made sense. So I went to do that.
How did you decide upon, because as we know now, there are many schools of psychotherapy and counselling, and but to actually land on psychosynthesis as a sort of specific model, was there what was your sort of journey around that?
Well, I decided that I wanted to study the whole thing. I had a friend who'd studied counselling and then gone through to psychotherapy, and talked to her about that, and gave me a book, basic different things, which, a book on these are the different types you can do, the different schools. Psychosynthesis and the transpersonal wasn't mentioned. So I looked at what were the training organisations in London, which could had the capacity, if I wanted to go through counselling to psychotherapy. And I went to 4 or 5 open days. So I went to the Tavistock, whose focus is obviously couples and an analytical approach.
Very famous organisation.
Yeah,
right?
I remember we went and we all, after there'd been a few talks, we were sat on a load of chairs facing almost the entire faculty, and there's this woman at the front with these glinting horn-rimmed glasses, at least that's how I remember it. And they all looked a bit severe. I thought, okay, well, this is all right, but yeah, do I want to do couples? Do I want to be sort of very analytical and stuff like that? Well, maybe. We'll see what else we get. So I went to IATA as well, which was beautifully fanciful, and this would be more focused on young people and play and children even.
Yeah.
And I remember there was sort of, again, it was a beautiful setting. They were sort of trying to practice what they preached. Well, they were practicing what they preached in as far as they'd got their centre was lovely decorated. It was like walking to some sort of opulent hall.
Really?
It was gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then I think there was about 60 people on this open day, and we did things like a bit of painting and some sand play and all this, and that was all good fun. But I did look around the room, and I was the only man out of 60, and there was, and I also noticed that actually 58 of the other people were white women.
Wow.
So, I just have that memory, and so I thought, yeah, okay. And it was very, well, I'll come on to psychosynthesis in a minute.
Yeah.
And I went to another centre whose name escapes me, which was much more my cup of tea. It was a sort of converted house. It was only a small group, and it was kind of okay. I didn't have any great feelings one way or another. But actually, I learnt that you couldn't really go through and do a master's in psychotherapy there. So I sort of thought, So then I went to Psychosynthesis Trust in London Bridge. And I remember going into this shabby building, traipsing up some rather rickety stairs and sitting down, and Alan Frater standing at the front of the class, sort of jotting down Assagioli's egg on a flip chart in a rather sort of, in his rather deadpan delivery, slightly sort of down, sort of, it's like this and this and that. And the carpets were tatty and the chairs were uncomfortable. And I thought, yeah, this is the place for me. So I don't know. So it spoke to me. It's also actually, I have to own that I also thought, and this is the easiest one to get to.
Right, because, London Bridge.
Yeah, well, I lived in Croydon at the time, so it was very easy to get to. But
I love that you're sort of saying that it's the place that didn't have the sort of shiny veneer.
Yeah, I didn't like the veneer.
Yeah, and I very much agree with that in terms of when I first applied at the trust. There was the website was terrible. It looked like it had been put together in the when the internet had first been invented. But something about that I liked because they didn't have the sort of shiny selling, thing going on.
Well, I think I liked the fact that that Alan didn't try and sell it. He just said, "Well, this is it," and and it was. So I thought, yeah, let's do the essentials.
Great. So what? And for the benefit of the listeners, what are the essentials?
Well, the essentials was then it was a 5-day intensive course you had to do before you did the sort of the first year of the PG dip study towards the counselling diploma. And that was kind of cool because it was a lot of it was an intense taster, including the bit they used to have. I think they don't have it now, where you could observe counselling sessions. That was all kind of cool, and and I enjoyed that. So I thought, yeah, let's do this.
Yeah. So you signed up for your foundation year.
And then the 2 years of the PG dip, and just sort of did that. Yeah, and of course we met in the first year of the PG dip.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And what attracted me to psychosynthesis?
Yeah.
Was the atmosphere. I at the time of signing up for the course and doing the essentials, I I wouldn't have considered myself a spiritual person particularly. You know, they'd always been an interest. So this was part of the personal journey as well, because I recall sort of in my early 20s, I was into a lot of meditation and Buddhism, and but kind of at that stage, the only spiritual thread that led through my life was yoga, because which I'd done since 1986 and still do.
Come on.
Yeah. So, and I must just, as a side note, say that's totally worth it, because I'm now more flexible than much younger people.
Wow.
Which is always gratifying.
Yeah.
Admittedly, other things don't work as well.
Hey, you can still, at least you can do a downward dog and
I can,
a sun salutation.
I can do more than that, mate.
Brilliant.
Anyway.
Yeah. Psychosynthesis.
So yeah, but I'd kind of lost the spiritual thread in my life. And so it was very sort of the sort of the coaching models I'd studied and the stuff I was interested in, the sort of stuff that I that spoke to me before I started doing psychosynthesis was things like transactional analysis, which is sort of quite easy to comprehend, makes sense.
So the parent, adult, child sort of model.
Well, yes, and that's but those sort of ideas which don't have any transpersonal element to it. And it wasn't that I didn't think to myself, I want to do a transpersonal course. I thought to myself, this feels right.
Okay, so it was a feeling.
Yeah.
That sort of enabled you to sort of follow that thread.
I followed my instinct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And didn't look back, I suppose. I was very glad it was a transpersonal training course. And I liked the models. I liked the way it worked. It all made sense. I very much liked the imaginative side of it.
Did you?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
You as you'll remember, the sort of some of the exercises we did and the
what sort of things do you mean?
Well, I'm thinking of when we did a lot of crayon drawing.
That's true.
A lot of sort of visualization, a lot of crayon drawing.
Yeah.
But I one of the things that really interested me was the symbology of it. The sword for the will. If you remember that, and
that's a big thing in psychosynthesis, isn't it? The will.
The will, yes, and then love, and I think we were visualizing being held in a big pair of hands or something like that. And sort of since explored those symbols further, and
So did you feel like that had an effect on your personal life, as well as your obviously training to be a professional?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I left my wife, so it had a big effect, and that was a direct result of inquiring into that side of my being, and realizing that my spiritual side was very much coming back, and interestingly enough, she was kind of going the other way.
I see.
I mean, when we first met, we'd both been interested and sort of quite into that in different ways, the spiritual side of things, and she kind of lost her faith over a number of years for various reasons.
So it sounds like there was a growing apart.
There was a growing apart,
right, okay.
And I think I knew that anyway, but hadn't really sort of recognised it.
So the training
crystallized it.
Right, I see.
Yeah, so like doing any of this work, it wasn't necessarily causative, but it was in as far as it brought things to a head.
Yeah.
And that was also part of having that sort of imaginative life and paying attention to myself as well, as opposed to the sort of the more nuts and bolts of existence. So developing the inner world.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, as opposed to sort of being in the outer world of going to work and watching telly and having a few glasses of wine, and you know.
Yeah.
Well, plus I was due a midlife crisis anyway, so which again was precipitated by being in that environment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple of things there, isn't there? I mean, I'd love to hear a little bit more about like what midlife crisis means to you. You know, I certainly know personally, even though we call it crisis, there's still a sort of feeling of release, and I mean, you have to have that kind of grief and letting go, but then on the other side of it, it's like I'm open to the new experience and what I can give in a different way, or new parts of me can be expressed. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear more on that. But you know, the other thing you were saying about how you sort of feel like the training kind of precipitated this change in you.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Is it what is it about psychosynthesis that allows that? Is it the model, or is it just, or do you think it was the training in particular, or was it a sort of mixture of both, or?
Well, I'm not sure about. I think the model is interesting, and gives you a frame for thinking about things. But I would have said actually it was the experience and the methodology of the training.
Okay.
And the relationships that occurred within the group, the relationship with myself. And I don't know, but I kind of imagine that if I'd been doing something, a different model, probably it would have led to the same thing.
Right. So it was the place you were in.
Yeah. I might have gone off in a different direction with a different model. I think the psychosynthesis model and its way of going about things has now led me in a totally different direction, to one that I might have gone on with something that was more sort of less esoteric, I'll say.
Yeah, yeah. So what you're saying is it sort of open, like you said earlier, is like this spiritual side that you'd never particularly recognised in yourself.
Well, you see, by crisis, I think of it in terms of a breaking and an opening up to something new.
Right.
So I think the breaking probably would have happened anyway.
Right.
That would have led to an opening up. But what then came in maybe had much more to do with the psychosynthesis way of looking at things. And I'm not sure that's about techniques or models or anything like that. It's much more to do with the attitude towards the heart, the attitude towards suffering, and purpose as well. Life path, whatever you might call it.
Yeah. So, I mean, well, as you know, this is called the Emerging Purpose Podcast, so we're in the right
put
area.
That purpose word in just for you, Greg.
Thank you, Chris. So let's talk about purpose. How do you see it? What is it? Is it something we all need? Is it something that that you feel that you have personally? Is it something that it's just, you know, like this one thing that you keep your eye on and you head towards that, or how do you see purpose? What's your concept of it?
I experience it as feeling I'm in the right place, doing the right thing. Certainly at the moment, I don't have any idea or any feeling of doing or being anything else than what I am. So I feel that I'm on what's the right path for me. And you know, in some ways that's a scary thought, because I don't have a plan B. If everything went totally tits up, I wouldn't think about, oh God, what am I going to do now? But I don't imagine it will. You know, because I'm in the right place doing the right thing. That's how it feels to me. Yeah. You sort of ask, does everybody need a purpose?
Yes.
Well, you know, we're linking there into ideas of meaning and having a meaningful life, and your life meaning something. You know, and purpose can be anything. You know, earning a lot of money, having a nice car, nice house, having kids, being a certain thing, or being yourself, you know, or experiencing the world and whatever way you want to experience it. And I think it's very important, if not essential, for dealing with the pitfalls of life, with suffering and crisis, and and that's what I think. When I sort of, I use the phrase midlife crisis, which is a kind of a popular way of talking about. Well, you reach your 40s or 50s or wherever it happens, and you suddenly think, hey, what's the point of all this?
Yeah.
What am I doing? And I think it's often experienced. Certainly for me, there was there's usually some sort of precipitating event. I suppose it started possibly when my father died. So the first experience of somebody dying close to me. Therefore, there's an existential event.
Yeah. And brings your mortality into focus.
Yeah, and I didn't consciously notice that at the time, but when I look back, things started to happen after that. So, and it's about waking up as well. So rather, you go to school, you go to college or university or get an apprenticeship, you get a job, you get married, maybe you have kids, you get a nice house. Okay, ticked all those boxes. Oh, fuck me, I'm going to die. What am I going to do now? How do I meet that?
Yeah.
I haven't really thought about that.
Yeah.
What's the point of all this?
And that's the classic time, isn't it? I mean, you see people going kind of off the rails, or what might look like going off the rails to them.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and I'm sure I could construe what happened to me as going off the rails. Yeah,
did you buy a motorbike or?
No, I got a sports car.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, it was an MGB.
Was it?
Yeah. So
why not?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't quite have the right sort of garage to keep it though, but there you go.
So you embraced that
I embraced
aspect.
it.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and actually, if my clients want to do that, I encourage them to embrace whatever. Which, a couple of them have bought sports cars. Both women, I hasten to add. So it's not necessarily a stereotypical male thing, but
brilliant.
But yeah, there's a sort of embracing the crisis, and things go a bit crazy for a while.
Yeah.
And
so do you think part of your I mean, you said earlier that part of the kind of coming to the trust to train sort of precipitated this new awareness in you.
Yeah.
So is that when you feel that your kind of own crisis came into focus, or existential crisis, or whatever you want to call it?
Well, I think I understood what had already been going on. So it crystallized it, or came into focus is a good way of putting it. And that was, it also brought about a necessary suffering.
Necessary suffering. Tell me more about that.
Well, if we don't suffer, then to some extent, I think it's very hard to achieve depth. And
interesting.
And I have a big issue with the aversion in modern society to suffering and unpleasantness. The pursuit of happiness. I don't think that's really a very good idea.
What do you see happening?
Well, it means that if the purpose of your life is to be happy, whatever that may mean, then you avoid things that make you unhappy.
Mm.
You know, anything that's difficult.
Yeah.
And of course, many things are difficult, but on the other side of them is something that's usually better than if you just avoided it.
Mm.
And of course, you know, avoidance can mean addictions.
Yeah.
It can mean shutting down all your emotions.
Mm.
It can mean lots of things that actually are fixes and very much in the short term, but in the long term don't get you where you might want to be.
Mm.
So, you know, I kind of like the some of the existential philosophers' ideas about actually living your life in intensity and those sort of ideas. You know, the purpose is to actually live your life fully.
Mm.
You know, and to experience whatever comes along.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually that might be more what's been called soul making.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So there's a sense that actually, if you don't avoid the suffering,
you might live your life with more depth. And
Yeah.
and of course in psychosynthesis there's the idea that you are increasing your emotional range, and that's, you know, that increases your access to joy as well as your access to sadness. So you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
Or, you know, you see that in the Jungian idea of the shadow. You know, for every light there's a shadow, and everything has a shadow.
Yeah.
So if you're always trying to avoid the shadow, you eventually narrow your life down to nothing.
Wow. Yeah. So in terms of the midlife crisis, it's almost like a breaking through of what you've decided that you're willing to experience.
Yeah.
And all this other stuff starts to come in and sort of flood that consciousness, and then you've kind of got a choice there whether you're going to try and batten that down and keep that new energy at bay, or whether you can allow yourself to sort of unravel. And
Yeah, and the unraveling was much more interesting.
right.
Much more interesting.
Yeah.
You know, and there's, you know, I'm also very aware of how the traditional medical reaction to mental health, which is to prescribe drugs.
Yeah.
You know,
Treat the symptoms.
You know, and the most of the medicines for depression, anxiety, psychosis, basically restrict your emotional range, damp everything down. You know, they don't. You know, the idea that they're treating some sort of chemical imbalance is perhaps slightly old-fashioned. It doesn't seem to have a lot of currency in even the modern medical thinking about things. So it's kind of the antithesis of what we might aim towards.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think. I'm not against antidepressants, but I'm kind of against the long-term use of them.
Well, and the vast overprescription of them.
Yeah,
I think that's the thing, that if the first reaction is to take a pill to get rid of the pain,
you're going to have to look at that pain at some point, right?
Well, unless you keep taking the pills.
But then I suppose that's my argument around. Well, I think, you know, in some ways, like antidepressants, they work for 6 months to a year in terms of dampening down the pain.
But your body adapts to them.
Exactly.
And
So then what?
You have a dependency.
Yeah. So do you either up them or you come off them?
Well, if you think about the antipsychotics and the long-term use of them and what that does to cognitive ability, how it can give you tremors, increases the likelihood that you're going to die of various many things, reduces your mortality. Well, not reduces your life expectancy.
Yeah.
It's actually, you know, yeah, I'm very wary of of substances that you then depend on to keep yourself normal, whatever that is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, I don't know if you have that experience of sitting with clients who are on antidepressants. And I'm not saying that it's a wrong thing, but the sort of vision I get of it is very much like when we talk about, looking at early childhood and the way that psychosynthesis looks at that and kind of says, well, you've got an external unifying center, someone, a parent or a caregiver who looks at you and may not see the whole of you because what they want is you to be in this letterbox view of how they see you, and then so therefore all these kind of traumas are created because we sort of have to squeeze ourselves into this letterbox view of how our parents see us.
Well, the other thing about, if I just sort of continue with thinking about the medical use of drugs with mental health.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, the connection
it's
with
where
that.
we're in a situation where this is how there's also that normalizing. Yeah, you should behave and you should experience life in this way.
Yeah.
If you think differently or behave differently, we're going to section you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like you. I'm not against the use of drugs per se. Because I think in the short term, they can help people stabilise and decide what they're going to do in extreme cases. But I am against their long-term use.
Yeah, well, I just don't think they work long-term. You know what I mean? The people up the dose, but it just keeps that letterbox view of yourself in terms of like you're not going to experience the highs or the lows.
Well, you're flattened.
Flattened, that's it.
Yeah, you're flattened and you're also often stuck.
Yeah.
Because that flattening makes it, especially of cognitive ability, makes it hard to progress anything. Your focus goes. Eventually, after long-term use, your physicality can start to go. You have quite often a real lowered desire for life or to do anything.
That's it. Yeah. So everything gets kind of dampened.
Yeah, and actually I've seen clients go into despair around this.
Have you?
Yeah.
How do you work with that? I mean, that's quite a broad question.
Well, it is a broad question. Well, one of the things I do is provide them with alternative information about the impact of drugs, because usually they've got very little idea of what the actual effects of what they're taking potentially are.
So they've kind of believed what they've been told.
Well, if you think about you go to the doctor's surgery, and your poor GP has got 5 minutes to sort something which is actually quite vast out. So with the best will in the world, they're not going to describe to you, well, these are the benefits, these are the potential harms, this is what you might experience. They're going to give you leaflets to tell you to do some research. Or possibly just say, try these.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the worst case. So mostly people don't have a very good idea of the impacts of what they're taking. And because, so just to draw this back to where we kicked off, which is is life about the pursuit of happiness or is it something else? If it's about the pursuit of happiness, you want to get rid of those feelings, be it depression or anxiety or hallucinations or whatever. And I've used the word hallucinations, and I'll come back to that.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
And you want to be normal in that letterbox, except that letterbox is very restrictive. But if you want to be happy, then you don't want all the bad stuff.
That's that. I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head with that. I think that's there's something about what we've been taught as a society, or what we believe how we should be, or how we should be able to cope with life.
Yeah,
and it doesn't necessarily include existential crisis, midlife crisis, falling apart, stopping, taking time. It's about, there's something about how it's about putting a plaster on it and carrying on. Yeah. Put a smile on your face and get on with it.
just buck your ideas
That's
up.
the one.
Yeah.
That's the one. And even, and I don't know about you, but even when you get people who are clients that turn up who are in that sort of situation, it's almost like they've got that internal message tells them that as well. So what you see in front of you is someone saying to you is like, or asking from you is like, how can I fix all this up and get on with it?
Absolutely.
And I'm pretty sure, well, I'd like to hear your opinion on that. It's like, well, I don't necessarily think that's what needs to happen.
Well, absolutely not. So I'm going to pick on the word hallucinations I used.
Oh, yeah.
Just to give that as an example.
Mm.
So if we think a certain way, one aspect of psychosis may be hallucinations, visual, auditory, tactile, whatever.
Mm.
But let's say we called psychosis a different way of experiencing and thinking, and we called hallucinations visions.
Mm.
Then and we were to take, say, a shamanic perspective on things.
Great.
Yeah? Where, so in the shamanic tradition, there's a period of experiencing the world differently, of suffering, which may go on for quite a time, but that's would be seen from that tradition as a way of gaining special knowledge, and people would be respected, and it's a different way of thinking.
You mean in the more sort of indigenous cultures or in our past? That's the way it's been seen.
Well, in indigenous cultures, but also in modern shamanism.
Oh, I see, modern shamanism.
That way.
Yeah.
I had a very interesting talk with someone who wasn't a client, but who'd had repeated episodes of, I'm going to call it different thinking, and found the most useful approach had been to view it from a shamanic perspective. And this is just one instance, so it's not something to draw any sort of rule from. But their experience was that their episode actually subsided a lot quicker, and because they were taking a different view of it, not trying to get rid of it, but experiencing it and letting it happen, and they felt differently about it as well. That sort of stigma that attaches to mental health didn't attach in the same way. So their self view was different,
right?
And what it was also leading them to do, which was to work and help others sort of experience some of the same sort of ideas and opening up, sort of flowed from that. So there's, and that seems to me a lot more beneficial than taking some pills for a couple of years and thinking, I don't want that to happen again, without asking the question, well, actually, what's trying to happen? Why is this happening?
Yeah.
And my experience of people who've had a psychotic diagnosis or diagnosis of psychosis is that how they experience it is, you can see why. The whatever sort of thinking has happened is based in their belief system. So they experience it according to their belief system. And how they've reacted to it is, as far as I've seen so far, you can trace back into some form of trauma.
Really?
Yeah. So, it seems to me that, and again, I'm not going to make a rule out of this, but it seems to me that at least one of the aspects of what we call psychosis is that people have had traumatic experiences which they've been unable to process adequately, and so they've their mind has, of course, made sense of this in terms of some sort of belief system.
Yeah.
You know.
So just to clarify that. So you're talking about the trauma. It's almost like the trauma, that something that happened along the way in life, kind of.
I'm talking about things like childhood abuse, loss, grief, bereavement. But some usually fairly heavy stuff.
Yeah. But then the person sort of turned that in on themselves and made, and like the action was the kind of trauma was the thing that the action they took against themselves.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And it might be, okay, so, someone with a narcissistic caregiver becomes very self-sacrificing, and there might be something like Jesus on the cross.
Yes.
Or I have to die for, I have to die to solve this situation for other people.
The martyr. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to be martyred.
Yeah.
And that's a very strong, there's a very strong belief within our culture. If you look at it, I have to martyr myself for others.
Yeah.
Which it comes from an obvious aspect of the Christian basis of our culture. So I sort of I see that. So it seems to me that what you fundamentally believe, or the imagery that you sort of swim in, affects your experience when you're reacting to whatever's happened that's perhaps been traumatic, or that's been my experience so far anyway.
Yeah. So when you're talking about psychosis, so it's almost like an extreme version of breaking out of that belief system somehow.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say I could say that necessarily, but it seems like something like that is happening.
Right.
I mean, you're familiar with Jorge Ferrer and his work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of his central ideas is that we experience the transpersonal according to our sort of belief basis. So, so therefore a Buddhist will perhaps, have a transpersonal experience which involves a vision of the Buddha. A Christian might see Jesus, and so forth.
Yeah.
So
we're all taking a different boat to a different part of the island.
Yeah.
And arriving on that.
One sea, many shores, I think is how he put it.
Yeah.
And, my own experience of that is, my imagery and the imagery I've worked with myself has been more pagan. So of course, when I see the shore, I see a pagan shore. Those are the sort of images that come to me.
So what do you see? The dancing tribes of witches and wizards and druids and...
Well, not exactly like that, but more sort of, it's more sort of the embodiment of a sort of a very basic pagan god within people, or
I see.
Yeah.
So there was more of an animalistic...
animistic.
Animistic, that's it. Yeah.
Well, it's just when I've experienced the transpersonal, it's according to the imagery and the set of beliefs which makes most sense to me. Or which, my own internal imagery and the imagery I tend to use work within. I wouldn't call myself a pagan, but I like and use the images because I find them meaningful in a sort of archetypal way. So that's my experience of the transpersonal.
Yes.
And, going back to, when we experience life differently, is that psychosis? Is it what's happening? Are we actually tapping into some aspect of the transpersonal as well? And certainly all the clients I've talked to say, yeah, there's a very deeply spiritual aspect of their experiences. But of course they're psychotic. So
yeah, so that that label itself kind of closes it down to something.
Well, and I suppose it's like it's like I don't know if you find this commonly, but I finally people who experience anxiety will often be anxious about being anxious because I shouldn't be anxious,
Yeah.
or the other one, I shouldn't be unhappy. Everything's okay in my life. Why am I unhappy?
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course there's that extra layer there which causes more distress. And I suppose my sort of what I'm thinking is that, again, because of how we look at mental health, and how we look at the purpose of life, that creates an extra level of distress. I'm not happy. Something's wrong. I shouldn't be unhappy. Why am I unhappy? Oh, it's okay to be unhappy.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The funeral was a month ago. Why am I still unhappy? Yeah, might take a bit longer.
Yeah.
You might continue to be unhappy at times for the rest of your life, and that's okay.
Yeah, I often kind of my concept of these different emotions like unhappy, sadness or grief or whatever's going on in our lives. I sort of have a sort of quite a simplistic view of it, but in terms of like radio stations playing within us, and it's almost like that feeling that there's quite a few radio stations going on within me, and I can tune in or out of them when I want to, so there's that frequency of sadness may be there, and yet mostly I want to tune out of that and be happy, but if I don't listen, if I don't tune in once in a while, that the volume on that sadness station is going to just keep getting higher and higher,
Yeah, or something else will happen. I mean, if you dissociate effectively enough, then you'll get sick.
Yeah.
You'll start drinking. You'll split up from your partner. You'll do whatever it is that you do.
Yeah.
Without having tuned in and become conscious of actually what's going on in the background.
Yeah.
But with these sort of feelings, I have the sense that ultimately we might be looking at acceptance, and I don't just mean a passive sort of I'm feeling sad, okay, this will pass sort of attitude. I think I'm feeling sad, let's sit with this and actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
I've certainly had the experience of in past years of waking up feeling quite depressed, knowing that's actually probably fairly appropriate. It doesn't have an immediate cause. Everything okay around me is okay, but these are feelings are coming up because I'm safe enough to feel them now, and actually quite relishing that feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, as a caveat, I also know that it probably won't persist very long.
Sure. So this too shall pass.
Yeah. And I think it's very different and much more difficult if you constantly experience that sort of level of lowness or anxiety to appreciate it.
No, sure.
That's very hard.
Well, that's about perhaps about developing, and maybe the work of therapy is partly to do with that. It's about developing your relationship with those emotions, and
so that they do come, but perhaps they don't hang around quite as much.
Yeah.
And then you can just sort of perhaps appreciate them.
Yeah.
Okay, so feeling a bit of anxiety, is it appropriate? And you also might ask, is it mine? But what's going on? And then it's gone, and you can appreciate feeling happy. Yes, you're even allowed to feel happy. So in this, we're talking about purpose still, right?
We are.
What's the purpose of life? Well, if it's something like living your life fully, then that suggests to me that you can appreciate all the emotions. This is like Rumi's guest house. Are you familiar with that?
I am, yeah.
Yeah, welcome them all in. All the visitors to the guest house. welcoming all your emotions.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I suppose what comes up for me in that is this, welcome them all in. That's why therapy for me, it does become a sort of necessary tool. And there are obviously loads of other ways to approach that, but therapy seems to make me accountable to myself in that way. Whereas if I sat on my own and tried to process that, I'm more likely to avoid it, or to want to feel a different way, or to, just not, or be kind of told by another part of myself that, that's okay, or you shouldn't go there, or you're a type of person if you go into that place. And I think that's what's interesting, isn't it, about being in a relationship with another person in therapy, because they offer you other ways of looking at it.
It's good to talk. But yes,
I'm just trying to sell therapy here, obviously.
Well, I think you can do it in ways other than therapy, but therapy is one of the easier ways to do it. It's you can do it through doing work with yourself and following a spiritual path. But I one of the other things I also think is that you need things that reflect you back. And the most obvious and easiest thing is to do that with somebody else, and that might be a partner, or a friend, or a therapist, or a group.
Yeah.
I think pets are pretty good as well. But
unconditional love.
Unconditional love, and if I was to think about purpose slightly differently, so we're here to be in our lives, and we might want to also get away from the idea of our life as an individual thing. So there's certainly an I, but the basic modern Western concept of the individual, I think might be a little flawed. So there's an I, but that I is the observer. It's not all the sort of personality and body and stuff like that. All the things which are often called transient.
Yeah.
The mind stream that changes all the time, and that all occurs in relationship to other people or places or things.
Relationship, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think we're individuals in the sense that we commonly understand it. I think we merge in and out of each other all the time. And within that, sense of self is quite important, because we do that, it's very easy to get lost. What's the sense of self? Maybe it's consciousness, and that sort of inner observing state, or self-awareness, or whatever we might call it. And when we're in distress, a lot of that to me seems to be connected to not being seen, not being reflected positively by others.
Yeah.
So and most commonly we might see that as, that there wasn't enough unconditional love or mirroring or reflection when we were young, or perhaps in other relationships that we've had. And I think one of the ways therapy works is you come and you're reflected, and you can see yourself and experience yourself, and have that reflected with love.
Yeah.
And I think it's very, people talk about you have to love yourself. Well, how do you know how to do that until someone else has done it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it an a priori inherent thing? Are we born knowing how to love ourselves? I don't know.
Well, there's that quote, isn't there? Marianne Williamson says, "Love is what we're born with. Fear is what we learn here."
Yeah, well, maybe.
Well, of course, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, but it's...
I just love that quote because it's kind of, there is something about being born with that openness to that, you know, and actually I don't think anyone escapes the trauma. Even if you come from a sort of really, a sort of lovely family that kind of shows you enough love, there will be moments that you get missed and you don't get seen.
Well, I suppose you can also make the case that actually just the birth experience is naturally traumatic anyway.
Well, exactly, yeah.
But I don't know whether we're born naturally loving or not. I suspect we probably are. But it seems to me that what we then experience in the world is going to make a lot of difference. So the idea that we have to learn to love ourselves, well, if we don't really know how to do it because we weren't shown how, then you need to come and be loved.
Yeah, be in relationship.
Which make, well, I'm going to say loved. You've got to be loved. If you're not loved and as who you are, as opposed to maybe a false sense of self, a pleaser, or pretending to be something that actually inside you're not. You know, we have to be loved in our fear and inadequacy and brokenness.
Yeah.
And so this is the external unifying centre, to use a bit of psychosynthesis speak, from which you learn to form your internal unifying centre. Yeah, so you learn to love
your own inner guru.
Yeah, well, if you're loved by somebody, or if your dog loves you, you might actually think, okay, so I am lovable, and learn to love yourself a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but much more powerful if it's someone you can talk with, experience with, and who understands and reflects you as a human being.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we're just coming to the end now, but it's been great talking to you about all of this stuff. But I kind of I'm just interested in terms of, talking about purpose and how all this fits with purpose. Is that something that you hold in mind when you're working with clients, or does it not show up as purpose? Is it?
It varies.
Yeah. Is it love?
I think it varies. Is it love?
I mean, you seem very, that what you just said, it seemed to sort of cover it all in terms of like, well, that's actually what what's kind of what we're all looking for, isn't it? Is that acceptance?
Yeah. Love, I think, is very important. Perhaps the most vital thing for us. And part of that love, if we were to link that together with purpose and meaning, is, because what we're talking about really is loving yourself as you are. Not trying to be something else, not trying to be happy, for example.
Yeah.
And not trying to be, well, whatever you think you're meant to be.
Being what you are.
Being what you are. So I also think that sometimes when I work with people, I think you're not doing the right thing for you. And I don't necessarily mean that just in terms of, okay, you're in a relationship that doesn't serve you, or, okay, you're doing this job, but actually it feels more like this sort of would or you're, yeah.
Yeah.
There's some assumption, there's something you're doing which feels wrong. You're not. So I sort of said earlier, my experience of, I'm doing the thing that I am meant to do. That's how it feels.
Yeah.
And sometimes I talk to clients and they're not doing the thing that actually they should be doing. So we're maybe we could flirt here with the ideas of having a life purpose, a thing that you're meant to do, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people that will be, growing up, getting married, having kids, doing a job. But the question is, who do you marry? What job do you do? Does that change along the way?
Absolutely.
You know?
Inevitably.
Yeah, inevitably.
Mm.
Um,
And then what?
and then what?
Mm.
And at what stage in your life are you? Because of course your purpose can change at different stages.
Yeah.
But are you being led towards something? You know, so you asked me earlier about how did I get into psychosynthesis? Well, I could say by accident, because there wasn't any sort of, well, if I do this and this and this, then and I'm interested in that, so that fits with this, and no, it's because I turned up and it felt right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
And
you went with that feeling.
And I went with that feeling,
Yeah.
which was a lot less painful than trying to work it all out cognitively.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't have any regrets about it.
Yeah.
You know,
and you're doing what you love, right?
And I'm doing what I love.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not because the journey was not painful. It was very painful.
Yeah. And it also sounds like you do what you love, but part of that transaction, if you like, I mean, I don't want to put it in such a transactional way, but is then, well, because you found that you in an area in your life. I mean, you know, we've all got places to grow and meet our edges, haven't we? But in that area, you found it felt right, and you followed that path, and it sounds like what you do is now you give that out as a gift, in terms of like helping other people find it.
Yeah, well, that's part of finding it for myself, I suppose. You know, I find increasingly as time goes by, I'm trying less and less to do something and kind of going with what happens. So it's like, earlier before we started this recording, I sort of said to you, I haven't used a technique for a couple of years,
right.
maybe.
Yeah.
You know, sort of sat down and done this technique or that technique. It's just sort of, it's really listening to people and seeing what emerges.
Yeah.
You know, and I suppose
trusting that.
Yeah, just trusting what emerges.
Yeah.
And maybe that, you know, I might suggest, keep a dream diary or do some writing. And sometimes clients do, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't feel that we've got to do anything in particular.
Right. Just
You know?
otherwise it could be another thing on the achievement list.
It's another thing you should be doing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
and I think that if, you know, I mean, the basis of therapy is free association. And
Right.
that seems to me to be good to go.
Yeah.
You know, if you're free associating, then you'll lead yourself where you need to go.
There's a sort of curious wonder through that, isn't there?
Well, yeah, a curiosity,
Yeah.
yes, a wonder and imagining your life into being.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Or dreaming your life into being, perhaps. And we might also think of it as but in therapy, I think it's also co-created. You know, so you could say you follow the client, but because there's two of you, it's a dyad.
Yeah.
Actually, the client brings something and you bring something.
Yeah.
You know, so there's something here also in that journey is I suppose it fits with what I was saying. You know, therapist and client merge together and then separate again.
Yeah.
You know, and they take away part of you and you take away part of them. So that's part of your experiencing.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, and I hope we can do it again sometime. We can maybe get deeper into the psychosynthesis or into another area. Just so people know what you do, and if they want to get in contact with you or have a look at what you're up to, where can people find you?
Probably best to look for my webpage, which is Creative Difference. So www.creativedifference.org.uk.
Great. So if anyone wants to find out more about what Chris is up to or his approach, you can have a look at that website.
Look at the website. My email is on there. Email me. You know.
Yeah.
Be happy to respond.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris, and goodbye for now, and I'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Take care. Bye. Thanks for joining me on the Emerging Purpose podcast. My name's Greg Donaldson, and if you want to catch any more of my work, I'm on www.emergingpurpose.net. Take care. See you soon.